a special project? No? Okay. Whenever there's like a large project, maybe an exam, that number definitely goes up. So the what I've heard from a lot of students and a lot of faculty is that by far the most important skill in university is to manage your time. You because the jump in difficulty from high school to university is pretty significant. I know a lot of people who really just breezed through high school, like they got high 90s without really putting in effort and without really developing study skills. And during the first couple of weeks of university, they were still fine because it was mostly review. But then once we reached midterms, uh, then their grades dropped because the reality is that university level course load is a lot harsher than that of high school. So definitely say the most important skill you need in order to enter university is to prepare your time management. Other than that, um, there's a bunch of soft skills that would be helpful as well. These include stuff like, networking, talking with other people, because you might be leaving your high school friend group as you move on to university. And it's really helpful to, in the first couple of weeks, to really get to know some people so you can depend on them for the rest of the semester and really for the rest of the university. Um, you have to be prepared for failure and iteration. Don't let the drop in your grades if you know, in high school, it's fairly easy to obtain high grades, meaning maybe high 80s, high 90s without much effort. But in university, um, actually, if I can find the common statistic that people cite is that in university, first year, grades drop by about 15 to 20% all across the board. Waterloo, I believe they have a table of this. Uh, okay, okay, maybe not here. Um, the thing is, if you were expecting 80s to 90s in high school without really working, then you can expect maybe dropping 15, 20 points in university, maybe 65 to 75 if you do not put in the work, if you just like attend class but don't really do the homework, don't really like let the content sink in. About exams, I believe Waterloo's exams are generally lighter than that of other universities like UFT. So we have a pretty conventional exam style. We have throughout the term, we've just got one midterm right in the middle, and then one exam at the end for every course. Um, However, the time for these midterms and the final exams, they're concentrated across every single course. So that means every course has them at pretty much the exact same time. What this results in is 1 week during the middle of the course. Yeah, 1 week during the middle of November, where everything is in exam. So you go to like this exam on Monday, you go to a second exam on Tuesday, and so on. So that whole week is taken up by exams. And then there's nothing, no such exams for the rest of the course up until the final exam, in which the same thing happens when all the finals happen at the same time, taking up another full week or even two. This style, I believe UFT has a different one, and probably some other universities, where they kind of like scatter midterms throughout the course year. So like this breaks them up, makes them there are some benefits and also some disadvantages to this. One benefit I can think of is that you encounter a midterm a lot earlier. And if you can like this really sets you up, this really gives you information about the difficulty of the course early on. Because at Waterloo, what I saw a couple of my friends experience is that for the first section of the year, it was mostly review. They didn't feel the need to really come to class or take notes or do their homework. And then all the midterms happen at once. And at the first midterm, they realize, oh, like I'm not prepared for this. I need more time to study. But it's already too late. The second midterm for the second course is already happening tomorrow, and third midterm, and so on. So it kind of results in this cascading effect where you suddenly realize, and it's too late, that you haven't really prepared enough. So that's kind of another trap that might happen with this style of midterm and final placement. I guess I could talk about some of the projects that we've done. So in my first year, or in my first semester, mostly it was just STEM courses. We had calculus, we had vectors, we had physics, and then we had a couple design courses and an English writing course, also a programming course. Generally, I found the STEM courses to have a lighter workload because there isn't really much project building there, at least compared to the actual project design courses. However, it's still important that you don't fall behind on your academics in those STEM courses. In the project building courses, the main one was what we call ECE 198. I think they list all the courses and their content on the website. So if you want, you can look into this one more. This one was just called Project Studio. And the idea behind this course, I think this was the hands-on course throughout the entire semester. The idea behind this course is in the first couple of weeks, they teach you to play around with Arduinos, software detectors, sensors, detectors, and then all kinds of basic circuit wiring. And then for the last 2/3 of the course, what they do is they give you a task. In our year, it was to create a device that helps monitor and prevent delirium onset in hospitalized patients. So they give you this task around 1/3 of the way into the course. And then for the next 3 months, all you do in this course is work on that task. And at the end, you have a huge symposium to present what you've created. So I'll talk a bit about what our team created. Hospital-induced delirium is kind of a hard disease to monitor and to treat because it's pretty subtle, at least compared to other conditions. So what we built was like this device that could easily monitor, I wouldn't say easily monitor, but rather it could give us some information on a patient's mental state using metrics such as their hand grip strength, their daily activity, and so on. So this removes the need for a nurse to actually actively monitor them every day, freeing up the hospital's resources. And at the same time, we could attach this to an interface such as like a website with some engaging games that could help reduce the risk of hospital-induced delirium. So this was like our project presentation that we submitted in the first third of the course. And then following that, over the next 3 months, we built this thing. So the technology used here, we had a software component, which was like a website that could interface well with the actual hardware component, which was the main part of the project. This hardware component was an Arduino board. We had a couple of microcontrollers strapped onto it. We had a pair of buttons that basically turned it into a remote controller, kind of like the ones you use on your TV. So it could, when you waved it around, it would control the mouse and the screen and so on. We had that also connected to a stress ball with a custom-made pressure sensor inside. This would send electrical signals whenever you squished it. That could give us some information on the patient's physical grip strength, which was helpful for monitoring their condition. And also we had another LED screen that this was just like for fun, but it was a nice challenge for us to get these two eyes to move around and respond to whatever the patient did with the mouse. Let me play a video of this. So like these are the kinds of projects you might expect to find as to find in an engineering program first year. Other than that, there was also like a communications assignment. We had to write a paper on a topic by choosing. So I talked about marketing effort against nuclear power. Okay, so that's enough about like actual campus life, I guess. Actually, no, I'll talk a bit more about campus life. So, um, depending on where you like live in Canada, some schools you might have to consider either uh, commuting there every day, which takes a lot of time, or finding a place on residence, which costs a lot of money. The good thing is for first years, a lot of universities offer a first year residence guarantee program. I know Waterloo does this. So a first year residence guarantee. What this means is that if you're a first year and you're applying for a place to stay, they give you priority in all of their dorms and campuses. So you're guaranteed that like you won't have to commute first year because you can't find a place to stay. Depending on the distance between where you live and the university you attend, it might be critical that you do find a place either on campus or somewhere in the city to stay. At Waterloo, they have a bunch of they do have a bunch of residences. Um, so I guess like the campus layout is most of the buildings are in here. Residences are kind of scattered around the edges. And then other than like teaching facilities, they also have recreation facilities. They have a gym over here. They have music room and art studios and so on. Those are included within your tuition if you pay them. So basically, they're free for everyone. In fact, you're already paying for it with your tuition. So it makes good sense to make the most use of those facilities whenever you can. Uh, how should you prepare for applying to university? For grade 11s, I would suggest, uh, sorry, why can I not write? For grade 11s, I would suggest the courses to take math. Do take math because pretty much every program requires at least a bit of math. Even if you're applying to um, political science or maybe social studies, like you won't directly need math immediately, but further on in the university course, you will have to encounter some math. So it's a good thing to get your fundamentals down. Take the grade 11 course for math, which is grade 11 functions. And I believe it is this, MCR3U. Other than math, it you just kind of choose courses that are related to your major. So if you want to go into anything related to the sciences, to engineering, to technology, it would be a good idea to take physics. Physics is probably the most important of the three sciences for these programs, and then followed by chemistry, and followed by biology. So, like if you're going into anything related to the sciences, do consider taking physics and then maybe chemistry as well. Although chemistry and biology, they do show up a lot less. In fact, I didn't take biology, and I don't believe my program has any work, even in higher years, that requires anything related to biology. So if you are considering taking a science, prioritize physics as well. Other than those, we have math, physics. Oh, you definitely need English. Um, this is just like a provincial requirement for graduation, and I believe every single university's admission requirements requires that you eventually get both the grade 11 English course and the grade 12 English course. So like you look at any university's admission requirements, they're going to list some courses that they want. So sometimes it's calculus, sometimes it's vectors, but every single one wants this grade 12 English. For grade 11s, what I'd recommend is uh, find some kind of project or some kind of extracurricular that you like and you can work on um, throughout the next year and a half, because extracurriculars do play a pretty big role in applying to universities. I'm not quite sure how they organize it in other universities. I know that a lot of the more competitive ones, that being UFT, McMaster, Western, all of them have like either an interview that they want you to talk about all your extracurriculars, all your experiences in, or they have like a supplemental written application. I'm just not quite sure how those are graded, but I do know that Waterloo has a very specific grading scheme. So for Waterloo, they have kind of what we call an admission score, and it's calculated with an exact formula, which is your average plus your AIF score plus minus your adjustment factor. So I'll go over what each of these is. Your average is just the grade average across all the required courses plus any remaining to fill up the 6. So what I mean by this is, suppose you apply to a program that has 3 required courses, like calculus and vectors, maybe advanced functions, and English. How they calculate this average is they take your grade in all of the required courses. So this one, this one, this one. And then for the remaining 3, because you are always going to have a top 6, they're going to fill up the remaining 3 with whatever the highest grade in the remaining courses is. So this means, like, take a careful look at what the course requirements for your program are. If they only require a couple courses, like here, this one only requires 3, then it might be optimal to take some perhaps easier, or maybe not easier, but like don't take any, I also shouldn't say that. Like take courses that you think would be helpful to you and might also help your average. Helpful for your education and for your average. So for example, if you're me and you know you're not really good at biology, then, and you know that biology isn't really going to play a good role, a major role in the university education, then there's no real reason to take biology when you can take a course that is both easier for you and is kind of more related to your major. So for example, instead of taking biology, I took data management, which was MDM, I believe 4M or maybe 4U. This one, data management, it wasn't a required course, but it was, I found it easier than biology and it definitely helped bring up my average. So that's the average and probably the main focus. This average is out of 100. So it's just exactly what your top 6 average is. Your top 6 being made out of all the required courses plus whatever is left is highest. So the average is out of 100. Then your AIF. Um, I believe that the AIF is scored out of 5. This was a number that I heard a lot during the process of applying, and I think I've heard professors and admissions officers throw this number as well. So your AIF is scored out of 5, and they score it according to like how impactful your extracurriculars have been, um, kind of what kind of person, your character, how well you can describe the experiences that you've had, how well you've answered the questions that they've asked. Your AIF, what they give you is like a sheet that you fill in all your extracurriculars in, and then 4 short questions where you kind of talk about your experiences. So that's scored out of 5. The median score on the AIF is a 3. Um, they they said like an average AIF, you get somewhere between a 2 and a 4. Usually it's a 3. So it kind of follows the bell curve. If you do like really poorly on it, the AIF, if like don't really answer the questions, then you get a lower score. And from what I've heard, it takes a lot to get like a max score on the AIF. You need like some really impressive accomplishments or so on. But remember, it's only scored out of 5. So the advice that I've heard, uh, and the advice that I followed during the year that I applied, is that just aim for somewhere in here, and then try, if you can, to bring up your average. Um, this is probably more important to focus on. So, like, if you've got projects due, if you've got assignments due, and you don't really have that much time to work on the AIF, these are the things you need to focus on. You need to focus on actually answering the questions. Like, read the questions, read what they want you to say, answer the question. Like sometimes they'll ask a question, and then what I see is that other people, they really want to talk about like this impressive extracurricular. And so they talk about that in that question. And what they end up not doing is actually answering the question. They kind of like throw in an unrelated paragraph. And at that point, the admissions officers, they'll be like that's an impressive extracurricular and all, but that's not what we're asking for. So always make sure you answer every single part of the question that is that they ask you. And usually the format of the question is going to be like something, describe a time you did this. What did you do to improve? What would you do next time? Something like that. So focus maybe like 60% of your answer into this, describing what you did. And then some people will forget these remaining parts where you actually have to talk about what did you learn from this? What did you do less? What would you do next time? Make sure you actually answer those questions. A well-written AIF, even if the extracurriculars aren't that impressive, like they're nothing, even if they're not like, international level awards or so on, that will definitely get you a solid 3 or a 4 even. So that's what you can get from the AIF. For the adjustment factor, unfortunately, this one is kind of out of your control. How Waterloo works is that every school in, I believe, Canada, has an adjustment factor, or if it doesn't have one, it uses the standard adjustment factor. And uh, this they came up with to combat grade inflation. So how they measure it is they take a student's average upon applying, like let's say that was 95, and then they take that student's average in Waterloo grades at the end of first year, like let's say that is 80. That drop from 95 to 80, they calculate that as 15, and then the average across all of this difference, the averages of all these differences across all the student body from that high school in first year, that becomes the adjustment factor for that school. So basically, it measures like how much you can think of it as like how much that school inflates grades relative to the to Waterloo's own scoring system. So some schools have a higher adjustment factor, some schools have a lower one. I don't believe they publish the adjustment factor list anymore, but you can look at the old ones from 2023, 2022, and so on. And the rankings of the schools typically don't change that much. So unfortunately, like this factor is a bit out of your control, but if you're lucky, you go to a school where the people in your school that actually make it into Waterloo, they they're academically prepared, they do well in first year, they like get a high grade, and then the adjustment factor for your school remains low. So this adjustment factor, it's just going to be a number. Um, I believe the provincial average for Ontario last year was around 14. I've seen schools range from around 10 to, at the high end, even like 25. But typically, schools' adjustment factors will range from roughly like 12 to 16. So this also isn't like the biggest deal. And it is a measure for fairness because, some schools do grade easier than others. Uh, don't worry about this too much. It is out of your control, but for what you can control, focus on your average the most and your AIF as well. Speaking of the AIF, um, this is probably where most people have the most questions. They really aren't looking for like uh, exceptional, like international level awards or accomplishments. More important than that, you have to, know, show like what kind of person you are. Show like, show off your personality, what you do in your spare time. Show that you're not like that academics aren't the only thing you have. It's really helpful if you have maybe a fun project or some kind of experience to talk about here. And again, it doesn't have to be like some super cutting edge thing. If you if you came up with some kind of club for your school, um, that's something you could put in. If you like built, if you draw, if if you play music, any kind of that extracurricular, this is something they do want to hear about um, in the list of extracurriculars they provide in the AIF. It's going to be like a table where you just enter in your extracurriculars. Also, make sure that they are genuine. In the list of extracurriculars, one of the sections is when you started, and I believe how many hours you spend on it per week. So, like, these kind of deter you from starting an extracurricular immediately before the application, and then like not really progressing anywhere, but just doing it for the application itself. Don't do that. They can definitely see right through it. Um, Try, if you can, to make your extracurriculars align with the rest of your application. What I mean by that is, I'll give myself as an example. Compared to all my classmates, I didn't really have any hardware experience, which was what a lot of them wrote about. Like they were out building robots and stuff. Uh, but what I did have was a lot of experience in um, competitive math. So I wrote a bunch of Waterloo's own contests. We can actually look at them here. wrote a bunch of Waterloo's own contests throughout grade 9 to 12. I scored pretty well on them. I like wrote other contests as well. I did like I was the leader of math club. I, tutored math. So all that together, it kind of I think the advantage it gave me is that it shows I'm like all of these are genuine experiences. These are like they all contribute to the kind of experiences that I've had. I wasn't like there was no way that I was making any of these up because it was all backed up by everything else. On the other hand, if I had, started some kind of charity a couple of weeks before the application deadline, and then I talked about that, that wouldn't really show up anywhere else on my AIF because all my experiences don't align with that. And they kind of see through that. So don't do that. Don't do extracurriculars because you think it makes you a stronger, just because you think it will help your application. Do them because, like, do them if they interest you and try to make them align with what your actual goals and experiences are. Um, Speaking of the Waterloo Math Contest, even if you're not really going into a math focused field, I would still recommend them because I'm not sure how heavily they're weighted, but they're definitely favored in the sense that, um, like, if you've got these, they're pretty quick. Like, it's a one afternoon thing. If you can sign up, do that math contest for that afternoon, put your result on your extracurriculars list. Like, that's just one more thing that you can talk about, and one more thing that they see related to your interest in the university. Obviously, it's better, if possible, to get a good result. But what I've heard is that a, a bad result is better than no result at all. So even if you don't feel that strong in math, even if you've like never done a math contest in your life before, it might still be worth a try signing up for one of these contests. I believe they cost between 15 and for the most expensive one, the Euclid, it might be around $25. So like if you think that that contest fee is worth the price, just sign up for it. Try your best on it. Maybe prepare a couple weeks in advance for the contest. And when you're done, that's something you can put on your AIF that shows your interest in the school. Um, I guess I should list some things that you shouldn't do for your AIF. Like as I said before, do not do not resume pad. Do not like do things just because you think they would look good on the application. Um, Try if possible to start writing your AIF early. Um, so like don't submit it at the last minute. If you actually submit it at the last minute, there's a good chance that the high volume of people submitting at the same time might like, you know, delay or even crash the server. Try to, if you're saving for the last minute, at least try to do it a day before. Um, but if possible, try to start writing it early. Even if you don't have that many experiences yet, it can be helpful to start writing the AF to kind of get a better idea of what kind of student you are, what kind of experiences would complement your student portfolio at the moment. So if you're like in grade 11 or so, something, you can start looking at the questions and then start thinking like, what kind of, what should I do with my extracurriculars in the next year that both interest me and might be interesting to write about on the AIF? Um, yeah, I guess that's most of the advice I have about applying to a university. Are there any specific questions about anything that I missed?
大家有什么问题啊？然后呢，可以都问一下啊。 首先，滑铁卢呢这边呢，这个工程在录取率上是非常低的啊。然后它也是加拿大的一个顶尖的一个这个专业，啊、在这个过程当中呢，然后呢，我相信每个学生都要从9年级、10年级到11年级，都要慢慢的去做 fully prepared，就是好好做准备。我也看到了很多学生对于工程的热爱。那么，首先我们可以知道我们工程将来要学什么，对吧？然后呢，那么根据我将来学什么，以及我现在如何去做，那么是非常重要的。那么根据不同的年级，Gavin 这里呢也 suggest 一些 some good suggestion。那么特别是这个 math competition 啊，就滑铁卢的数学竞赛。然后呢，其实可以多刷一点题，然后多做一些。实际上我们现在所学的这个普通的大纲里面的教材哈，然后呢在大学里面实际上是不够的远远不够的。我们实际上是要学的更多。我相信在这个过程当中，如果你有 AP 或者是你是 IB 的学生，那相对来讲你会更知道这个更会去接受一些挑战。这个我相信，在这个 AP 和 IB 的学习当中，它的挑战也比 OSSD 咱们普通的课程呢要难度系数大一些啊。那么关于这个准备数学方面的，那么 Gavin 呢，他的是非常优秀的他参加过多次的这个竞赛，并且奖励也很多。那么而且呢，他很多的这个 leader skills 他也有就是很多 club 的那么我相信，就是可能 Gavin 这边你能否再介绍一下，就是如何去找一些有用的这个 activity，让这个 high school 学生去参加，然后为他后期申请大学，包括写 AIF 当中，那么更加有意义。
Okay. So where can you find these meaningful activities to put on your AIF? Um, I would again recommend the math contests. They are like pretty quick. They're a low investment cost in terms of like what you have to do to complete them. Of course, if you want to get like a a high score, if you want to get placement on their honor roll and such, that will require a lot more preparation. And if something math and science focused is your goal, then that should be something you study for throughout your high school. But aside from the math contests, um, try to get into clubs within your school. It shows that you're involved with the student body. It shows that you're willing to give back to the community. So clubs, if you can, try to get like a leadership position, some kind of exec. Maybe if you see a niche that you're interested in that there isn't a club for, you could even try to found your own club, right? And then when you're writing about this on the AIF, make sure you emphasize like what not only what the club is and what you did, but what results you achieved. So try to focus on, for example, you could talk about like the figures they want to hear are maybe the size of the club, the the number of people coming every week, what you help them accomplish, maybe um, personal sentiments of the people who attended, maybe like they feel better about math, better about science, they feel more confident, so on. These results are good for your application. Another place you can find meaningful activities, if you're into, okay, if you're into programming, for example, you could look around for local competitions, local hackathons, I believe they're called in programming. Waterloo itself hosts a large one, which is Hack the North every year. But you don't just have to compete in these large scale events. If you can find a local one, maybe at your school, maybe at a neighboring school, that's also a good thing that you can prepare for. So preparing for it not only like gives you knowledge, gives you something to write about, but also increases your chance of getting like a prestigious award. What other extracurriculars would I recommend? Hmm. So leadership positions are pretty helpful. These don't have to be in clubs. If you can, see if you can, like if you have some kind of extracurricular, if you dance, if you sing, maybe see if you can get some kind of leadership position within those extracurriculars, because this is both something that they want to see. Like, I believe some of the questions on the AIF will specifically ask you about, like, what is the time you led a team, and like, what challenges did they face? How did you overcome those challenges, and so on. Mm, in terms of like just math and science, uh, like as I said, math contests, science contests as well. If you're applying to Waterloo's Faculty of Science, they host two contests. They host the Sir Isaac Newton, Sir Isaac Newton grade 12 contests, grade 12 physics, and they host the Chem 13 news exam. So if you're feeling confident in physics or in chemistry, uh, it's a really good idea to try these out too, because I believe the Faculty of Science, these contests don't get that many applicants, but the Faculty of Science has a lot of scholarships to give out. So last year, what happened was that pretty much anyone who competed in these contests, they got a $1,000 scholarship for the Faculty of Science. It didn't really matter what kind of score you got, even if you only answered a few questions, because there were so few people writing these contests and the Faculty of Science had so many scholarships to give out, everyone got $1,000 for an application to the Faculty of Science. Um, yeah. There's also, if you can, I believe there are some like special summer programs, research programs, maybe I believe Waterloo itself hosts one. It's called the QSYS. I forgot what it stood for. It was like Quantum School for, uh, let me just search this up. QSYS. So it's something I believe they host every summer. And if you can apply and get into it, then you have some research experience to talk about at the end. This is also a really good extracurricular if you can get into it. Any kind of like summer program, research program, these will be very helpful as well. Are there anything else you want to specifically talk about? 有没有什么其他问题？
大家你看还有什么问题啊？然后很难得我们能能直接和工程学院的学生直接对接，你会更加的直接的啊，direct no 啊，你应该做什么啊？这是工程滑铁卢最棒的，其实是它的 co-op 啊，真的很好。然后在 co-op 过程当中呢，滑铁卢的 co-op 有专门的老师会负责帮助学生啊，准备 co-op 的或者是就业的一些这个准备工作，甚至会和企业积极的联系，然后确保他们的学生呢，然后呢有更多的机会啊，这个是我自己也是深有感触的。咱们还有这个不知道有学生和家长哈，然后 do you guys have any the other questions before we leave？
你好，我想问一下，就是滑铁卢的这个 COP，就是相比于其他大学，它有什么独特的优势吗？或者是说有什么特色、时间之类的？
有， 华特伦呢，它的 co-op 是加拿大最大的。它对不起，我的中文不是太好，我会用英文说。So other schools, how they work is that they have like continuous study years. Every year, it's all study, maybe summer break somewhere in between, and then all study afterwards. Waterloo, what they do is that they break up the year into a study, 4 months of study, 4 months of work, and then another 4 months of study. There are 6 of these work periods throughout a course or throughout a program. So 6 times you get to find a co-op and then spend 4 months working there. This is way more than any other university. Like if I compare it to UFT, I believe their strongest co-op program there is the PEY program, PEY. And how, if I remember correctly, how it works is that first and second year you study, and then you take a year, like you take one 12-month period to go work at a co-op, and then third and fourth year, you come back and study. So if you compare, that's 12 months and it's all concentrated in 1 year versus Waterloo's, which has 24 months of co-op and it's spread out throughout the entire program. So you can like slowly develop your skills over time. And also Waterloo offers a lot of help to co-op students. They have the largest job board out of all universities, which is Waterloo Works. And they also have, I believe, the highest employment rate out of all universities in Canada. So this graph here is an employment rate of Waterloo students over the course of their study term. So from month 1 to month 4, that's during the study term. That's when students will both be studying and applying to co-op. You can see that like every time there's a cycle, the employment rate rises massively. And by the end of the work term, it is pretty close to 100%. I believe this is a lot higher than any other co-op program. UFT's is like 50% by the end. In any case, Waterloo just has the largest job board and then probably the most support. And its program structure is like designed around helping students get co-ops. So I hope that answers the question.
好的，谢谢。
Yeah, Jonas, do you have any question?
No. I think he covered most of it.
Okay. If you guys don't have any questions, I think thank you for you guys and thank you, Gavin, and we can talk with you guys later on. Thank you. Have a great day. Enjoy.